There's a thin line between authority and abuse of power, and sometimes that line blurs in the heat of the moment. This is a story about assumptions, consequences, and the long shadow cast by prejudice. The morning sun cast long shadows across Pine Avenue in the quiet suburb of Oak Ridge. James Wilson, a 58-year-old African-American man, was carefully tending to his front lawn. His movements were precise and methodical, habits formed over decades of discipline and attention to detail. The neighborhood was peaceful, mostly white, and upper middle class. James had moved here 3 years ago after retiring, seeking tranquility after a lifetime of chaos. He paused to stretch his back, the old injury from 15 years ago still making itself known when he spent too long bent over. His phone rang. It was his daughter, Keisha. "Dad, I can't make it tonight. Tyler's got a fever." James nodded, though she couldn't see him. "Don't worry about it. The little man comes first. We'll reschedule." After the call, James noticed a silver sedan slow down as it passed his house. The driver, a white man in his 30s, stared at him with unconcealed suspicion. James was used to it, the sideways glances, the subtle crossing of streets, the clutching of purses. Even here in his own front yard, wearing pressed khakis and a polo shirt, he was still viewed with suspicion. The sedan circled the block and passed by again. This time, James made direct eye contact with the driver, offering a polite nod. The car accelerated and disappeared around the corner. James went inside to prepare lunch. His house was modestly furnished but immaculate. Military precision governed the placement of every object. Photos lined the mantelpiece. James in his SWAT uniform, James receiving commendations, James with his late wife, and James with Keisha and her family. 30 years in law enforcement had taught him many things, but the most important was the value of clear thinking under pressure. Later that afternoon, James headed to the local hardware store. He needed supplies to fix a leaking pipe under his kitchen sink. As he drove his 10-year-old sedan through town, he noticed a police cruiser fall in behind him. The officer followed him for several blocks, maintaining a consistent distance. James kept precisely to the speed limit, stopping completely at every stop sign, using his turn signals well in advance. These were old habits, defensive driving born of necessity. The cruiser's lights flashed on. James sighed and pulled over, positioning his hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Through his rearview mirror, he could see Officer Ryan Parker step out. Young, maybe late 20s, with the confident stride of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. Parker approached cautiously, hand resting on his holster. "License and registration." "May I ask why I've been pulled over, officer?" James asked calmly. "License and registration first," Parker repeated, his tone hardening. "They're in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now," James said clearly, moving with deliberate slowness. He handed the documents to Parker, who studied them with a frown. "Mr. Wilson, we've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. A man matching your description was seen casing houses on Pine Avenue." James felt a familiar tightness in his chest. "I live on Pine Avenue, officer. I was doing yard work this morning." Parker's expression remained skeptical. "Step out of the vehicle, please." "May I ask why that's necessary?" "Step out of the vehicle now, sir." Parker's hand tightened on his holster. James complied, moving slowly and keeping his hands visible. "Officer, I believe there's been a misunderstanding." "Hands against the car, feet back," Parker ordered, ignoring James's comment. As James assumed the position, Parker began patting him down with unnecessary roughness. "What were you really doing on Pine Avenue?" he demanded. "As I said, I live there. 1478 Pine Avenue. I've lived there for 3 years." Parker scoffed. "Sure you do. And I suppose that expensive lawn equipment in your garage is all yours too?" James remained calm. "Yes, it is. Officer, I'd like to speak with your supervisor." "You'll be speaking with a lot more than my supervisor if you don't start cooperating," Parker said, pulling out his handcuffs. "You match the description of a burglary suspect. Multiple witnesses reported seeing you around several houses that were broken into." "That's impossible," James said. "I've been at my home all morning except for this trip to the hardware store." "Hands behind your back," Parker ordered, ignoring James's protests. As the cold metal of the handcuffs closed around his wrists, James felt a familiar anger rise within him. He had spent decades enforcing the law, only to find himself on the receiving end of its misapplication. But he knew better than most how quickly situations could escalate. "Officer Parker," he said, reading the name badge, "I believe you're making a serious mistake. I'm a retired law enforcement officer." Parker laughed. "Yeah, and I'm the chief of police. Save it for the station." As Parker pushed him toward the patrol car, a black SUV pulled up behind them. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 60s stepped out, wearing the uniform of the Oak Ridge Police Department with captain's bars on his collar. "Parker, what the hell are you doing?" Captain Michael Reeves called out. Parker straightened immediately. "Captain, I'm just bringing in a suspect in the Pine Avenue burglaries." Reeves approached, his face a mixture of confusion and growing anger. "James? James Wilson?" James nodded. "Hello, Mike." Reeves turned to Parker. "Remove those cuffs immediately." Parker hesitated. "Sir, this man matches the description." "Officer Parker," Reeves cut him off. "This is Commander James Wilson, retired head of the Regional SWAT Division. He was my superior officer for 15 years. Remove those cuffs now." The color drained from Parker's face as he fumbled with the handcuff keys. I had no idea, sir." He matched the description we received. "And what description was that exactly?" Reeves asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Parker swallowed hard. "Male, African-American, 50s to 60s, seen on Pine Avenue." "And that was enough for you to handcuff a man who identified himself as a resident of the street?" Reeves asked incredulously. As the handcuffs came off, James rubbed his wrists. "It's all right, Mike. Just a misunderstanding." "No, it's not all right," Reeves said firmly. "Parker, wait in your vehicle. We'll discuss this further at the station." After Parker retreated to his cruiser, Reeves turned to James. "I'm so sorry about this, James. This isn't what we stand for." James nodded. "I know that, Mike. But it's what some of your officers stand for, whether they admit it or not." "This won't stand," Reeves promised. "Would you be willing to come down to the station and file a formal complaint?" James considered the question. Throughout his career, he had believed in the system's ability to correct itself when properly challenged. But he had also seen how complaints against officers often disappeared into bureaucratic black holes, especially when filed by people of color. "I'll do more than file a complaint," James decided. "I want to address this directly. Your department needs training on implicit bias, and I think I'm uniquely qualified to help with that." Reeves looked surprised, then relieved. "You'd be willing to do that, after this?" "Because of this," James corrected him. "Change doesn't happen by avoiding uncomfortable conversations." The following week, James walked into the Oak Ridge Police Department. The lobby fell silent as officers recognized him. Some knew him by reputation. Others had worked with him over the years. Officer Parker sat stiffly in the front row of the briefing room, clearly uncomfortable. "Many of you know me," James began. "For those who don't, I'm Commander James Wilson, retired. I served 30 years with the Regional Special Response Team, the last 15 as SWAT Commander. But last week none of that mattered because I was just another black man who looked suspicious in a white neighborhood." The room remained silent as James recounted the incident. He didn't raise his voice or point fingers. Instead, he spoke about patterns, about assumptions, about the split-second decisions that officers make and how those decisions are influenced by unconscious biases. "I made those same split-second decisions for 30 years, he continued. "I know the pressure you're under. I know the fear that sits in your gut when you approach a vehicle or respond to a domestic disturbance. But I also know what it's like to be judged solely on the color of my skin, even with a badge on my chest." Officer Parker stared at the floor, his face flushed with shame. "I'm not here to condemn anyone," James said, making eye contact with Parker. "I'm here because I believe in this profession and the people who choose it. Most of you became officers to protect and serve. But you can't serve a community that you view with suspicion and fear." Over the following months, James became a regular presence at the department. He worked with officers on scenario-based training that highlighted implicit bias. He shared his experiences, both as an officer and as a black man in America. Some officers resisted, seeing his presence as an indictment. Others embraced the opportunity to learn. Officer Parker was among the most resistant initially. During one training session, he challenged James directly. "With all due respect, sir, we're making split-second decisions based on limited information. Sometimes race is part of the description we receive." "That's true," James acknowledged. "But when the only descriptor you act on is race, that's not policing, that's profiling. The description you received could have matched dozens of men in this city, yet you chose to stop me. Why?" Parker had no answer. As winter turned to spring, James received a call from Captain Reeves. "We've got a situation," Reeves said. "Hostage scenario at First National Bank. Gunmen inside with at least 10 civilians. SWAT is mobilizing, but they're 20 minutes out. Parker's the first responder on scene." James drove to the bank, breaking speed limits he had once enforced. When he arrived, he found a perimeter being established. Parker was behind his cruiser, weapon drawn, looking overwhelmed. "What's the situation?" James asked, approaching Parker. Parker seemed surprised to see him, but quickly briefed him. "Single gunman, agitated, threatening to shoot hostages if demands aren't met. He's requesting a helicopter and safe passage." James nodded. "Classic desperation scenario. He hasn't thought this through, which makes him dangerous. Is negotiation established?" "I tried," Parker admitted. "He's not responding well." James studied the younger officer. "You want my help?" Parker hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir." Together, they established communication with the gunman. James coached Parker through the negotiation process, keeping the gunman talking, building rapport, identifying his motivations. When SWAT arrived, James helped coordinate their approach based on the intelligence Parker had gathered. The situation ended without bloodshed. The gunman surrendered, and all hostages were released unharmed. Afterward, Parker approached James. "Commander Wilson," he began, "I owe you an apology. Not just for today, but for that day on the roadside. I didn't see you as a person. I saw you as a threat. That was wrong." James recognized the sincerity in Parker's eyes. Recognizing the bias is the first step to overcoming it. "I'd like to learn more," Parker said, "if you're willing to teach." The incident at the bank made local headlines, with James and Parker highlighted for their successful resolution of the crisis. The story brought attention to the department's new training initiatives and to James's role in them. 6 months after being handcuffed on the side of the road, James stood beside Captain Reeves at a community forum. Residents from all neighborhoods in Oak Ridge had gathered to discuss policing practices and community relations. "We've made progress," Reeves told the audience, "but we still have a long way to go. Commander Wilson has helped us see our blind spots, and we're committed to addressing them." James took the microphone. "Change doesn't happen overnight. It happens one conversation, one incident, one realization at a time. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress." A woman in the audience raised her hand. "How can we trust that anything has really changed? My 16-year-old son is still afraid every time he sees a police car in the rearview mirror." Before Reeves could answer, Officer Parker stepped forward. "Ma'am, I can't speak for every officer, but I can tell you that I'm not the same officer I was 6 months ago. Commander Wilson didn't just file a complaint against me. He chose to educate me. He could have ended my career. Instead, he changed it." The woman nodded, not entirely convinced but willing to listen. As the forum continued, James found himself reflecting on his career. He had joined law enforcement believing he could make a difference from within the system. There had been times when that belief had been severely tested, when he had faced discrimination from the very colleagues who were supposed to have his back, when he had seen the system fail the communities it was meant to protect. After the forum, James walked to his car in the parking lot. He noticed Officer Parker heading to his cruiser for the night shift. "Parker," he called out, "stay safe out there." Parker nodded. "I will, sir, and thank you for everything." James watched the young officer drive away. The incident that had brought them together had been painful and humiliating, but perhaps some good had come from it after all. Change was possible, slow, difficult, and imperfect, but possible. As he drove home to Pine Avenue, James noticed how the neighbors who had once watched him with suspicion now waved as he passed. The silver sedan that had circled his house now belonged to a neighbor who had recently invited him to a backyard barbecue. Small changes, but meaningful ones. James pulled into his driveway and saw Keisha waiting on the porch with Tyler. His grandson ran to him as he got out of the car. "Grandpa, Mom says you're teaching the police." James lifted the boy into his arms. "I'm trying to help them understand some things, yes." "Are they good guys now?" Tyler asked with the directness only a child could manage. James considered the question carefully. "Most of them are trying to be good guys, Tyler, and part of being good is learning from your mistakes." Later that evening, after Keisha and Tyler had gone home, James sat on his porch watching the sunset. His phone rang. Captain Reeves. "James, I wanted to let you know that the department has officially adopted your training program as mandatory for all officers. The mayor is on board, and we've secured funding for the next 5 years." "That's good news, Mike." "It's because of you," Reeves said. "One terrible incident could have ended in a lawsuit and more division. Instead, you turned it into an opportunity for growth." After the call, James remained on the porch, thinking about cycles of harm and healing. One incident on a roadside couldn't erase decades of systemic issues. One training program couldn't eliminate ingrained biases, but perhaps they were steps in the right direction. The stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. James thought about all the young men who looked like him, who didn't have the protection of his reputation or his experience. He thought about Officer Parker and whether his change of heart would last. He thought about his grandson growing up in this community. The work was far from over. But tonight, in this moment, James allowed himself to feel something that had been in short supply throughout his career and retirement. Hope. Not the blind optimism that ignores reality, but the stubborn hope that acknowledges how far we still have to go while refusing to discount how far we've come. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new confrontations, new opportunities for misunderstanding and growth. But tonight, on the porch of the home he had worked his entire life to earn, James Wilson was at peace with the complicated legacy he was building, not just as a decorated commander, but as a bridge between communities that had stood apart for too long. The night was quiet on Pine Avenue. James Wilson watched over it, as he always had, with vigilance tempered by compassion, a guardian still on duty, in his own way.